Our first guest speaker this evening, Michael Godin, lives his life with passion and drive. From an early age, Michael displayed a talent for predicting hit songs. His love of music saw him entering the field of radio broadcasting while he was still in high school. After leaving school, Michael branched out into television and marketing. His success in these fields eventually led him to the position as head of the Artist and Repertoire Department of A&M Records Canada, where he later became a vice president for the label. While at A&M, Michael worked with many well-known acts, including one of the world's superstar songwriter and recording artists. In addition to artist management, Michael also spent time managing a large charity. And currently, he is in the 16th year of hosting Treasure Island Oldies, one of the most highly regarded internet radio programs, with broadcast and internet affiliates around the world. Michael is an example of how passion can lead to fulfilling and a satisfying life. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to present to you our guest speaker for this evening, Michael Godin.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the very warm welcome this evening. It's indeed my pleasure to join you this evening and to celebrate the 15th annual DOPT award ceremony with you. I look around the room this evening and I see that for some of you, this is not your first career, while others have chosen optometry as your chosen career at the outset. You know, it doesn't make any difference what your age is, or when you decided to help people that with their vision and deciding that that was for you. To me, there's one thing that you all have in common: passion and commitment. Dictionary.com, seeing as we live in an online world today, I didn't want to go to Webster's dictionary, I figured I'd go to dictionary.com. Defines passion as any powerful or compelling emotion or feeling, and commitment as the act of being engaged and involved. You combine those two words and you end up being fully engaged and committed with a promise or pledge to yourself to remain focused and to do your absolute best. To me, that's what a successful career is all about, no matter the field of endeavor that you decide to pursue. If you permit me for a few moments, I'd like to tell you about my own passion and my own commitment that has been my kind of guidepost throughout my entire life. I figure I started my career when I was about 5 years old. My mother would have the radio on in the home, and whenever a particular song struck me, I'd say to her, "Mom, that's a good song." And as the years progressed, radio continued to grow and to become a massive attraction to me. I loved the music. I loved the disc jockeys, the tight on-air production, and how exciting it seemed to me. So I became a rabid radio fan, listening every day, or at the very least, every evening. I'd call the DJ in the studio, say hello, enter contests, and it was a common occurrence for a package to arrive from the post office at my home with my winnings. Usually records, but sometimes other types of prizes as well. In fact, I must have been about 10 years old when I won a wooden shoe shine kit. Put your foot on it, had all the shoe polish and the cloth and the brushes, and to this very day I still have that Esquire shoe shine kit. I guess I must have been about 10 years old when I decided to set up my own little radio studio in my bedroom. I had 2 record players or turntables, a tape recorder, and a mic. And I even used my mother's sewing machine pedal that I hooked up to the microphone, that I could turn it on and off with my foot. Now that was very high tech. I used to record my shows onto my tape recorder and play back and listen to the 15 minutes, because that's all that was the amount of time that was available on that little 3-inch spool of tape that I had in those days. I listened to it also to see how I could improve. And when I was in my last year of high school, my friend and myself started the first ever radio station in high school in the city of Montreal. we'd invite our DJ heroes from our local top 40 station to do guest shows. And on one occasion, a British disc jockey by the name of Roger Scott came to do a really great show. And a few weeks later, John Lennon and his wife, Yoko Ono, were in Montreal as part of their world-famous bed-in for peace. Well, I brazenly thought that I would call the hotel and speak to John Lennon. 16 years old, by the way. I tried for a few days, but every time I called, the hotel phone operator would say, "Oh, the room is busy, that phone is busy." Well, you can imagine with all the media around the world wanting to talk to John Lennon, I was never going to get through. Well, I kept trying, and the next day, and in my deepest 16-year-old voice, asked for John Lennon. And the hotel operator stunned me by saying, "One moment, please." The phone rang, and it was answered by a gentleman with an English accent. I immediately recognized that it was that same Roger Scott who had been to our high school radio station a few weeks earlier. When I said to him, "Is that you, Roger?" he replied, "Yes." And I reminded him that I was from the high school radio station that he had visited just a short time previously. I said I was hoping to speak with John for a minute or so, just to ask him a couple of questions that I wanted to be able to play back for our listeners. He said John was very busy, but hang on a second. The next thing I knew, I hear, "Hello, high school." It's John Lennon. 3 words I'll never forget. Hello, high school. Well, I managed to ask John about 5 questions, and the whole interview only lasted about 3 minutes. However, I had my tape recorder handy, and I recorded that phone conversation and interview. And to this very day, I have the interview that I did with John Lennon from when I was 16 years old. And on my radio show that I'll tell you about in a couple of seconds, on the anniversary of John's death, I always tend to play back that very special interview to me. That event, plus having my own show at our little high school radio station, cemented my passion and my commitment to want to become a professional in radio. After graduating from high school, I went to college and was in the communication arts program and working part-time in a grocery store as a cashier. One of my regular customers lived at the other end of the street from us, and her husband worked at one of the other radio stations in Montreal, CFCF. Well, one day she asked me if I ever thought about going into radio, and I couldn't figure out why she would say that, and then she said, "I think you've got a good voice, and you should consider it." Well, I replied, I always have wanted to get into radio and to get a job. Well, she said that the next time that her husband Keith came in the store to help her take the groceries home, she'd introduce him to me. And that day happened. We met, I reiterated that I really would like to get a job in radio, and to which he said, "I'll send an application to you in the mail to complete. And it's not for on the air, but it's for a job as a technical operator running the equipment that's on the air." Well, the day that the application arrived, it was in February, I completed it, and I think I sent it back in the mail the very same day. And you know what happened after that? Nothing. I never heard another thing. I was so disappointed. So I continued working part-time and pursued my communication arts courses with the hope of getting a job in radio upon completion of the term and the graduation with a degree in communication arts. But at the end of the second year, I was going to go full-time for the summer at the store. Well, one day I got home and the phone was ringing. And of course, this was pre-answering machines, pre-voicemail, so the phone just rang and rang and rang. I managed to run into the house, answer the phone, and it was Keith Randall from CFCF asking if I was still interested. And I felt like saying to him, "You need to get your head examined. Of course I'm still interested in working in radio." So I immediately said yes. We met the following week, and I got hired to work part-time on weekends just for the summer. When I announced to the grocery store manager that I was leaving because I wasn't going to be able to work on weekends, and that was a peak time in the grocery store retail business, I had no choice. And he said, "Oh, I'm disappointed because you've got a good future in the store here as possibly a manager." I said, "Thank you very much, but I need to do this." And what's the difference from working full-time in the summer to only working part-time in the summer at the station? But nonetheless, it's what I really wanted to do, and I did it. Was I ever thrilled? A few weeks into this part-time weekend job, they asked me if I would consider staying on full-time for the summer, because there'd been a change with one of the other operators. So I said, absolutely, fantastic. Continued working full-time during the summertime, and then went back into my third year at college. Several weeks into it, I was still working part-time at the station. And several weeks into this new school year, they asked me, would you stay on full-time on a permanent position? Well, I have to tell you, I was in heaven. I know that I was about to make a major decision. I thought to myself, well, I could continue for the next couple of years and get my degree in communication arts with the hope of getting a job in radio. I had a job in radio. So I decided, yes, I'll forego the rest of my education and I'll take this job. I really had that as a passion. It was just something I had to do, something I really wanted to do. About a year from the day that I got hired, I was actually made the music director for the FM station. And at the time, it was the #1 FM station in the city, and I was only 19 years old at that point. A couple of years later, I was given the all-night show on the AM side of the station, and I was able to develop my on-air skills. And I stayed at that AM and FM combo for about 3 years, and eventually went to work as a music director and the midday DJ at a station in Quebec City, the only top 40 station in the town, as well as the only English radio station. Now, I'm not going to get technical, but radio stations work on a transmitter. Most of them are 10,000 to 50,000 watts. We had 250. So we were kind of like, almost like the wind-up transmitter. However, despite having such a limited amount of power, we became the #1 station and forged a reputation that continued for many, many years. I ended up returning to Montreal a couple of years after working in Quebec City as the music director and the host of weekly radio specials at a station called CJFM. During that time, behind the scenes, I had been asked by my friend, the program director, who I had worked with previously, to develop a soft rock music format, as we were getting trounced by the hard rock station in town. So when we launched the new format, it actually became the very first soft rock FM radio station in Canada. And at this particular station, there happened to be a lot of politics, something that you just may encounter over your career. And just as the new format was being launched, there was a coup. The general manager, the program director, the news director, the sports director, a lot of the other departments, and practically the entire staff were let go. I was still fine-tuning this brand new launched format. And I had this idea that once I finished all the fine-tuning, I'd probably join the rest of them. So I decided my days were numbered, so I decided I didn't need to be part of this. For the first and only time in my life, I quit a job. I'd never left a job before, and I've never left a job since. It was pretty brave, and it was somewhat scary, but when you're 22 years old, not too much phases you. During the time and the years that I worked in radio, I was music director at every one of the stations, and I developed some really great relationships with the various record companies. And one in particular was A&M Records. They had presented me with my very first gold record for breaking an artist by the name of Gino Vanelli and helping his career to get launched. So when I quit this radio station, I went to Toronto for a visit to some other record companies and some other radio stations, and I ended up having a lunch one day with the president of A&M Records of Canada. And one thing that I think you'll probably find, timing is really a key factor in moving forward in your career. He had a position open for someone to run the artist and repertoire department, which is basically the talent scout division of the label. I figured that if I could listen to new releases from the record companies and pick out what I thought were hit records, I could take it the next step and listen to new unproven artists and groups and their demo tapes and pick out those artists and their songs that had good potential. I ended up staying at A&M Records for just a few months shy of 11 years and became the vice president. And during my time at A&M, I worked with many talented people, but 3 of my proudest signings, interestingly enough, were all Vancouver artists: Paul Jans, the Payolas, and Bryan Adams. I've received many gold and platinum awards, and also a diamond award for Brian's Reckless album, which sold over 1 million copies in Canada alone and countless million throughout the rest of the world. I also signed the group the Payolas, and one of the members, Bob Rock, went on to become one of the top producers in the world, having produced Aerosmith, The Cult, Bon Jovi, Motley Crue, 311, Metallica, Our Lady Peace, The Offspring, and most recently Bush. I also signed Paul Jans, another Vancouverite, and within 6 months of signing him to A&M and having his first album released, he won a Juno Award for the most promising new male vocalist. Well, after working with Paul and developing and selecting songs for his second album, I came to the conclusion that he had great talent, he was a great songwriter, producer, and a recognized recording artist virtually out of the box. All he needed was a manager. I had never been an artist manager. What did I do? 1986, I left A&M Records, moved to Vancouver, and started a management company to represent Paul Jans. The next year, we released his second album, and one of the singles became a top 20 hit in the US on the Billboard charts, on the adult contemporary. His third album that was released netted the #1 and #3 songs of the year in Canada. And I also brought other artists into my management roster and signed songwriters to my publishing company. And after Paul's next album received gold record status, we switched labels and had more success again with radio and touring. He got tired of being on the road, and he decided to leave the music business. He went back to university, got his PhD in theological studies, and Paul Jans is now Dr. Paul Jans, working and living as the head of the Department of Theological and Religious Studies at King's College, Oxford in London, England. I decided to switch gears and move from managing artists to managing a charity for Western Canada, the National Advertising Benevolent Society, a charity for people within the music business, within the media, marketing, and communications industry who fall on hard times through illness, injury, employment issues. And it's a charity that is supported by its own charity. I did that for 13 years. All the while, I was kind of itching to get back into radio. And in 1997, as the internet was really developing, I had the opportunity to go back on the air with a radio show that was online. I called the show Treasure Island Oldies. I'm proud to say, as Matt indicated, that I've just celebrated the 15th anniversary of my show at the beginning of May. I had no idea how that was going to unfold, how it was going to develop, how it was going to grow, if at all. It's now syndicated around the world, heard on over 28 FM, AM, and online stations in Canada, United States, England, Scotland, Sweden, Germany, Singapore, and New Zealand. I consider myself really fortunate, and I'm very lucky. I've got listeners around the world, friends around the world, friends in Langley, as well with Matt and Faye. And I'm really glad that I'm here with you tonight. In 2007, I began writing a blog. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I just figured I'd write a blog and talk about songs I played on the show, or write an updated newsletter every week, etc. Well, that has evolved since 2007, and if you did a Google search for Oldies blog, you'd end up with maybe 12 to 15 million results, and Treasure Island Oldies blog is number 1 or number 2 in the world. Even with podcasts, which have become popular. I have a weekly feature in the show called The Rock and Roll News, which talks about the events that took place in history. And it's now among the most popular podcasts in the world. I had no idea that it was going to turn out that way when I started. And when I look back upon my career that I've had thus far, there's 2 things that stand out to me. The passion that I've had and the commitment that I've had to doing what I was doing, no matter what I was doing at that particular time, no matter what the job was. I've been fortunate to serve on the board of directors of CARIS, the Canadian Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, the people that put on the Juno Awards every year. I served as a director for over 7 years, and when I completed my term, I was given a Juno Award for my dedication and for my efforts. I was also recognized at the time as the youngest and the most successful record executive in the history of the Canadian recording industry. And as I'd like to say today, that and $2.50 gets me on the bus. It's just a great story. Other than that, it's just a story. I'm not saying this to you to brag. I'm just telling you that I didn't go out to break any kind of industry records. I didn't try to create any history. I didn't try to receive any awards. It happened as a result of my passion and my commitment. Tonight, you're all here to celebrate the success of your fellow students. Some of you will receive awards in the form of bursaries. Others won't. My good friend Red Robinson, who I shared an office with downtown for over 13 years, and who's been recognized by so many organizations in Canada and the United States, including being elected to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, told me one day something that his grandfather, who lived in Comox, told him. The man does not seek the reward. The reward seeks the man. I firmly believe that. Sinclair Lewis, one of the most popular novelists in the United States in the early 20th century, wrote books such as Elmer Gantry and Main Street. He said, "The seekers for prizes tend to labor not for inherent excellence, but for alien awards." If I can offer you any advice, it would be this. No matter what you do in your career, be passionate, be committed, be authentic, or don't bother. You will be rewarded with a successful career and a satisfying life. And yes, you may even receive recognition and awards. Not everyone can or will get awards during their career. This isn't sports day in school where every student gets a ribbon for being part of it. It's not the way life is. I didn't break records in radio, sign artists to a record company who became successful, or return to radio with Treasure Island Oldies to gain recognition or awards. I did all these things, and I continue to do what I love. I'm passionate about it, and I'm really committed to doing it. Incidentally, I don't make any money doing Treasure Island Oldies. I do it because I love doing that show. That in itself is a great reward to me. I wish every one of you tremendous success in your chosen path. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. And my thanks to Tony Vian for the invitation to speak with you, and to Matt for suggesting me to Tony. Thank you, and enjoy your evening.